Attention, take your seats, please. All right, welcome everybody. My name is Jim Carr. I am the county chair for the Chemung County Democratic Committee, and it is good to see folks from the community out to see and listen to the candidates that they're going to have to choose from in the Democratic primary and then on in the general election. I welcome everybody. I want to first of all thank the team led by Dora Leland for putting this together from Chemung and Steuben County. Give them a big hand. I also want to bring to your attention, we have a lot of candidate tables around the room. Feel free. It is petition time. The 6 candidates, I'm sure, have petitions at their tables, and you feel free to support the candidate of your choice, and that's why we're here tonight, so you can take a look and see and hear what the candidates have to say. Also in the back, we have our Democratic Committee table, and it is Pi Day, which I think is a math thing. And because it's Pi Day, we have pies at the table, and they are for, I don't want to say raffle or for sale, but there's a fun activity where for a few bucks you can get a pie. So stop by the pie table and check it out. So again, I welcome you. I'd like to introduce Dora Leland, who put this all together. Give her a big hand, her and her team. And she is going to moderate this debate.
Thank you. Now I'm going to try and talk real close to here. Usually I'm used to shouting without a microphone because they take it away. I did not put this all together. I had an amazing group of people helping, and I'd like you to give them a round of applause. They worked really hard. So I want to thank you for coming here tonight. I'd like to also thank our county chair, Jim Carr, and Steuben County Chair, Sean Hogan, for coming together to make this happen tonight. I'd also like to thank Susan Skidmore and the Working Families Party for providing those delicious cookies. If you haven't had any, make sure you go back and have some. Yeah. Lastly, I'd like to thank EOP for allowing us to use this amazing facility. Please note, however, though, that EOP in no way endorses any candidate or party and maintains its nonpartisan stand in all matters. But I really would like to give them a warm appreciation for allowing us to be here tonight. Okay. So at this point, I'd like to briefly go over some of the key points of tonight's debate. It's a little different than we've done it in the past. On the back of your programs are the complete rules. Some key points, though, a committee made of members of both the Chemung and Steuben County Democratic Party requested input for questions from a wide variety of community organizations, businesses, and agencies. We asked them to submit questions to the candidates, and these questions, along with those that were submitted tonight, will be used and categorized by Jim, and we will randomly pick those questions out. Questions that are not chosen, however, will be submitted to the candidates. They will fill them out, and we will post their answers, so every single question will be addressed. Those answers and responses will be put on both the Chemung and the Steuben County web pages. So there'll be 9 rounds of questions. There's like string here. There'll be 9 rounds of questions. What I'm going to do is Jim will hand me a question. I will read it. Then I will randomly choose 2 of the candidates. They will then move to the center, and each candidate, the name that I choose first, will get to respond first. They will have 2 minutes to respond, and I'd like to now call attention to our timekeeper, Deb Lynch, and Marshall Hyde. Oh, and they're pretty tough, so I think they'll keep us to task here. So the person I choose first will have 2 minutes to address the question, and then the second person will have their 2 minutes. Then we will have a 1-minute rebuttal from each. Now, at any time after that, any of the candidates that were not chosen that would like to weigh in will have a 1-minute chance to weigh in on the question. They have in front of them markers that they will, there they are, that they will put in the cup. What this does is it ensures that we keep ourselves to task and we don't lose track of who's answered. So after round 9, then I will randomly choose again, and candidates will be given 2 minutes to basically close up, present their platform, their thoughts, their ideas. And I would ask the audience to, you have a feedback form, please fill that out. Every candidate will be given a complete compilation. So every candidate will see how they did compared to all of the other candidates. So it's very important that you fill that out, and we will get that to them. I would also ask that you hold your applause, and I know there'll be lots of applause, that you hold your applause until the end just for time's sake. Okay, are we ready to begin? All right. So we are going to start with our first question, and Jim is going to choose randomly. And the question is, this is from the Southern Tier Library System. It says, as a potential representative of the 23rd Congressional District, how will you advocate for libraries and cultural institutions that are so vital to our rural communities? The President of the United States has proposed to eliminate the Institute of Museum and Library Services in his fiscal year 2018 budget. So the names chosen to address this are, first candidate, Max Delapia. Our second candidate is Rick Gallant. And I gotta stop for a minute, because I kind of got ahead of myself. I never introduced them. So, who are they? So I would like to start now, and in your pamphlets are the pictures of them and quotes, and they have tables all through here. Starting at the beginning, Linda Andre, Max Delapia, Rick Gallant, Ian Golden, Tracy Machano, and Eddie Sunquist. I feel like I know them so well that they needed no introduction. Thank you all. Okay, so the first names I drew were Max and Rick. And Max, you were chosen first, so you will address the question first. Would you like me to read it again? You can do whatever you'd like. Is the mic on?
I got it. Oh my gosh. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your engagement, because your engagement is what's going to make the difference as we go forward. Anybody who knows me knows I love to read, and I think that education is the bridge to hope. It can get you out of a community that may not be affluent, and that's what self-made people do. And if we take that away from them, I think that's not the direction we should be taking, because we depend on an educated electorate for our democracy. And every voter should have access to a well-stocked and well-run library, and I am fully behind it, and I would not be cutting funds for that. Thank you.
Rick?
Again, thanks, you all. I told people, I hope we don't walk out that door and there's 8 inches of snow on the ground, which has happened before. Interestingly enough, my brother is a retired librarian at the Cuyahoga County Library System outside of Cleveland. His wife is retired from the Cleveland Public Library System. My Aunt Charlotte, who is just turned 100 this past summer, is a retired librarian also from the Cleveland Public Library System. I am a teacher. We understand how important access to not only the library itself, but times have changed so much. All the things that libraries have to offer, whether it be computers, whether it be after-school programs, all the things that are offered through our satellite libraries are extremely important. And it's extremely important for a lot of reasons. It's important not only for the actual resources that the library has to offer, but it also gives people a sense of belonging and a sense of understanding that we live in a place where people care about us. So I agree with Max. I'm totally against that.
Okay, thank you. Max, you have 1 minute to give a rebuttal. Rick will then have another minute, and then we will open it up to the other candidates if you'd like to weigh in.
I guess one thing I would add is libraries, public libraries, are often the only source that some people have to have access to a computer. And where would we be without it? I don't want to know that answer. But I can tell you that I fully support our libraries, and I'll do everything I can to make them fully funded and fully stocked. Thank you.
Obviously, rebutting something like this would be crazy. That everyone in this room supports this concept. Anybody that's read a book, been there, and Max is dead on. So the kids that I deal with, a lot of them don't have access to the internet at home. And so in order to get access to the internet, they have to go to the library. So it's, again, not only is the resources important, but the fact that they know the resources are there is extremely important.
Thank you. Would any of the other candidates like to weigh in at this time? Tracy? You can stay there or you can go in the center. There you go.
My mother was unable to go to college because of circumstances at the time, but she was a great learner, and she actually had 3 library cards within the City of Rochester library system, and I learned that kind of engagement because she used it to educate herself. When I was then working at Cornell University as the Director of Information Technology Policy, and 9/11 happened, and 6 weeks later we got the USA Patriot Act. It was the American Library Association that taught this country what was at stake in terms of the privacy that we were giving up when we lost the balance of civil rights and government surveillance. And they remain today at the forefront of an understanding of the connection among and between what both Max and Rick talked about, and that is a democracy, an educated community and citizenship, and how important privacy is as a principle to underscore those values. Thank you.
Thank you. Would Eddie?
Thank you. So for me, as a middle school science teacher, which is what I started my first career as, I'll tell you what, I had students that would come in the night before and I'll say, hey, did you get your homework done? And they would tell me that there are only 2 places that they could go besides their home to get their homework done. Either the library or McDonald's, because those are the only places that you had access to Wi-Fi. You know, and it rings home to you because the library closed early, but McDonald's did not, right? So for me, a library is the most important space that we have, and we see it eroding left and right. We've got our libraries selling off their artwork, but they're places where people can go to learn to make a resume for the first time in their life, to read the newspaper, to actually check out books that they need to change their outcome and their look. But the reality is our libraries are much more than that. They're places where we now see maker spaces happening, where we start to learn 3D printing. There's spaces where we can start to change our community and start to teach people skills across this district for trade skills and training to get people jobs here in this district.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Next question. Okay, this is from ProAction. It says, if you are elected, how will you invest in workforce readiness, and would it include a focus on early childhood? A follow-up regarding workforce readiness for those unable to work, what do you believe society should do to support them? Okay, so our first debater for this question would be Linda, and our second debater will be Ian. Okay, so Linda, you were drawn first, so you'll get to respond first.
Is this working? Yes. So the first, the question is a 2-part question, as I understand it. Would I work to invest in workforce readiness? Well, I think workforce readiness probably begins in preschool. So we know that Head Start programs work, that children who are engaged in social interactions at a very early age and who are engaged in learning at a very early age do better. So that's where workforce readiness begins. It continues on into high school when young people are going for maybe even earlier for their first job, but certainly by the time they're in high school, they are employable and learning how to present at an interview, learning how to dress, learning how to speak, learning how to write their resumes. After that, they'll need training. So workforce readiness today means being trained for 21st century jobs. Those are clean energy jobs that I look forward to supporting in our community in particular. The second part of that is, what should society do? Can you please tell me the rest of that?
Oh, I'm sorry. The second part of the question said, for those unable to work, what should society do to support them?
Society should fully support them. I believe that people should have, who cannot work, should have a guaranteed income. We already do that with our elderly with Social Security. So if people cannot physically work, maybe they can mentally or emotionally work. There are all sorts of work, including volunteering. But certainly we need to take care of each other and provide people with basic needs that they have to live.
Thank you. Ian?
I think our district and so many individuals are absolutely ready to work, and I want to support them in any way that I can. The reality is that our District 23 has been really left behind, I think, for probably decades now. We've lost a good chunk of our manufacturing base. We've lost some of our youth population with them. The recovery since 2009, upstate as a whole, I think, has gained 2.5% in jobs, and that's versus 11.5% in the city and 9.5% statewide. And they've largely gone to some of our larger metro areas and not to much of our district. And so we really, I think across the district, we're spending a lot of time on foot and connecting with people. I think one of the areas that we continually hear is some of the jobs that we have, our individuals either don't have the sufficient skills base, or they can't stay drug-free long enough or to pass the drug tests to really get those jobs. And I think, they point toward different potential solutions. There's one entity here in your neck of the woods with the GST BOCES PTEC program over next to the airport. I'm inspired by the program. It really blends relationships with 10 or 12 different area corporations, and it says these are the skills that we need our youth coming out to have. And I think that's really important in terms of the relationships. We need to destigmatize some of the vocational training programs that I think were really popular historically that we've really lost, and not be funneling all our kids maybe into college track if it's not appropriate. And we also really need to step up and support the legislation. Various pieces of legislation has been introduced this past year into Congress that will train our workers, provide opportunities for women and girls in STEM programs. We need to fund the academic opportunities, the Perkins Act. So many ways that we can be really promoting workforce skills training. And I think that it's a really, I think, deep question with a lot of different layers, and good thing we each have one more minute to maybe address it.
That was the point. Linda?
Thanks, Ian. That was great. I'd just like to add to that. In order to work, you have to be healthy. So some of you already know that healthcare is vital, and it's one of the most important issues I think we are facing today. So I propose that we have a single-payer system called Medicare for All, and that will take care of readying our young people, dealing with the opioid epidemic that we're facing, dealing with those people who cannot work. We all should be taken care of in this country with a single-payer system. That will make the employers ready to employ as well.
Agreed, and I was, had this vision of maybe Linda and I would both get the single payer question tonight, because this is one area that we can really collaborate. I think that we've been, leaders on this topic in the field, and it's a pretty, critical part to the equation. I think we also need to address, in terms of the workforce readiness and the skills training and the jobs that are there, make sure we're also addressing both economic and cultural equality. There's not necessarily a fair and level playing field. If you also talk about just the quality of, in the economic sense of the jobs we have here and the jobs that we're losing to maybe other states, again, there's so many tangents to this question. Let's talk about unions and collective bargaining and strengthening those, It's not a level playing field. New York is losing jobs to the the right to work states when there's anything, but that. So if we're talking about really the skills and the readiness, let's focus on those vocational tracks, make sure that kids are educated to take them on. Those that have lost the work opportunities, that have provided the funding to be retrained and access those jobs. So let's work collectively to make that happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Would any of the candidates like to weigh in? Max?
This is perhaps collaterally referred to, the opioid crisis. First of all, I would like to address that by changing the economic opportunity that creates despair, that makes someone more likely to become addicted. Secondly, I think we need to hold Big Pharma accountable because they knew exactly what they were doing and they caused it. They should be held accountable and be part of the solution. Third, I think we need to destigmatize opioid addiction and treat it for what it is, and that is a disease. And I went to family court in Tompkins County not too long ago, and I watched people walk through their experience in trying to get off opioids. It was heartwarming. It was a great experience, but it requires investment of our government, more parole officers, more judges, more beds, and more resources for them to do that. And to do that, we
Thank
have
you,
to,
Max.
and we want to pay off. I'm sorry.
Thank
We
you very
want
much.
that, yeah.
Tom, I was going to be tough. All right, Tracy, would you like to weigh in?
These last two questions are in my bailiwick. I know I'm using them up quickly. But first, we need to have an infrastructure in order to train our students and people who want to be retrained for 21st century jobs. We need the foundation of an internet throughout this entire district, and we need the federal government to help the state and the local and the private-public partnerships who have been working assiduously towards it, but we have yet to achieve it. We need the federal government to help us with that, and that is what you should expect a representative to bring to this district. Second, we need educational reform. We need digital and information literacy in our curriculum, just as we need language arts and mathematics and STEM and so forth. We are living in a world that operates now on the internet, with the internet, and all that it promises and it perils for us in that environment. We need to be educating our children about it. We need free education for trade, vocational, and community college, as well as certificate programs to be sure that we have people properly trained for this 21st century workforce.
Thank you, Tracy. Rick?
So I'm going to work backwards a little bit and go back to the preschool end of things. So preschool programs are essential to get kids ready to learn. Preschool programs are one of the very first things on the chopping blocks. Not only preschool programs, which gets people started on the learning track, but also before and after school programs, which keeps them involved. Free and reduced lunch programs, which keeps them fed and keeps those kids coming to school. It's very difficult to train someone if they're not in school. And those are the kind of kids that I see a lot. And the second part of that is Ian mentioned it, is the BOCES program. We have to continue to not only maintain funding, but to push the funding to train students when they're in high school to have the opportunity and to tie that into local businesses. We're very fortunate around here in some ways, very unfortunate in other ways, that we have businesses in the community that are willing to tie in with BOCES, and I think that's huge.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to weigh in on this question? Okay, we're going to move on to our third question then. Thank you. Okay, this is from IBEW 139, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. If elected, how can you protect union and collective bargaining rights for both public and private sector unions? And the first person debating this will be Eddie, and then following him will be Tracy.
Tracy, come on.
Yeah. No, but you can go right up there with him. Yeah, what'll happen is you two will be there, he'll have 2 minutes, then you'll have 2 minutes, then a rebuttal, then a rebuttal. Thank you. Eddie, you're the star student. Good job.
No, thank you. Thank you. Trust me, guys, we are ready to lead you in Congress, okay? No, I think that's a great question from the IBW, and it's something that I've been talking about my message the entire time, which is without our unions as the backbone of our society, as protecting our rights from some of our employers, we don't know what's going to happen. You know, you see things like the Janus case that's coming up. You see issues going on with right-to-work states. Those are things that we need to legislate in order to protect our unions. There's a real concern amongst union members that with this constitutional case coming out under Janus is that we're going to see the end of our unions. And I think that is something that we need to work to legislate against. We need to make sure that we protect the rights of our workers here in the 23rd District and across the United States. I do not support a right-to-work state. I think that it's important that we have unions that fight and organize for our folks, because that's what provides us the benefits that we need. But more importantly, my entire view and message has been we need jobs in this district. We need retrained workers. We need 21st century jobs, as Linda pointed out. But that means that we need our unions to gear up to really push the apprenticeship programs. We need our community colleges to start to work to bring people in to train them for technical skills and trade skills. We need our libraries to be centers where folks can go to learn the skills they need to move forward. And I'll tell you what, as a representative, and this is something Tom Reed has been horrible at, I promise that we would do whatever we can to make sure that our unions stay strong and stay here right in the 23rd. If anyone has seen Tom Reed, he'll tell you that, you know what, he supports that right to work. He supports those employers. But what we've seen time and time again is employers who just trample over the rights of our workers just for a mere work. That's not okay with me. And I promise that we are always going to fight to make sure that we've got unions and good quality jobs and benefits here in this district.
Thank you. Tracy?
We are all Democrats up here, so you're not going to get a counter opinion to what Eddie very nicely stated. I will fill in some of the other blanks. I came into this district originally in 1981 to study labor history at Binghamton University, and am grateful for the education that I received there to have a doctorate in this area, and I studied with a labor historian. Maybe that is part of why I have been particularly sensitive as I look at the changes over the last 40 years in this country that have had the effect of diminishing unions and giving more and more rights to businesses. It's not right. It's not how you build a middle class. It's not how you maintain the kind of society that my father fought for and you are all citizens of and want to protect. In particular, and most important, we must reform labor laws. They were built for the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. We have a different economy now. It's not a manufacturing or industrial economy. It is an information economy. We need to have organization, collective bargaining definitions that comport to this workforce, not to a workforce almost 100 years ago. When it comes to the Janus case, should the decision come out against unions, and I'm afraid with this conservative court, one could safely predict it, we must be ready as representatives and in Congress to bring the legislation that's going to turn that around like we should with Citizens United and a lot of other ways that the Supreme Court has been going in the last few years. Finally, the Workforce Opportunity Act could have been referenced in the last question. It is legislation that if people are removed from their jobs because the employer has sent those jobs overseas, it provides an opportunity for people to go back to school and get retooled, but it's not funded enough. I created a program at the University of Massachusetts with the Mass Mutual Corporation to do exactly that. And right at the moment, the time comes up, I have to pass the microphone off.
You will get another minute. Eddie?
You know, I agree with Tracy in the fact that we need to reform, not only reform our labor laws, but it's not just the labor laws, it's also our workers' compensation laws and our unemployment laws. You know, as a workers' compensation attorney, I've represented countless folks who've just been working hard at work and have hurt themselves and can never work again, who've been addicted to opiates that they've been prescribed by their doctor legally and will never be able to go back to work. You know what? We've got a system that punishes those people for working hard, and until we fix that system, Until federally we make it work, we're going to continue to see the same thing over and over again. And so I will continue to see those clients come back hurt each and every time. And it hurts me every time.
Tracy? You have
Yes. So for economic development, which is all part and parcel of jobs and what we need to do for labor unions, it will take the kind of health care that's being talked about here tonight, ideally in a single-payer system as soon as we can get it. We need to have proper education and educational reform and support, such as the Workforce Opportunity Act. We have to have the infrastructure. We have to conserve our environment, and we have to and will attract new capital at that point for 21st century workforce. That's how we revive our unions. We do immigration and labor reform in the context of all of that, and we will revive our middle class. We will bring unions back alive and back into the Democratic Party. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any candidate like to weigh in? Linda?
So my dad was a union worker. He was a welder, and it provided us with a very good family situation. So today, we do have labor laws. We just have to uphold them. We know that since the 1970s, we have lost 50%, around 50% of our union workers, and that has translated to wage stagnation. So it is vitally important that we support our union workers. We have something coming up now called the infrastructure program, or the infrastructure revitalization of our country. We have to be very careful that when we do this, we do not allow the private sector to take over. We need to make sure that our unions are supported by prevailing wage. We need to make sure that our union workers are not harassed when they are doing collective bargaining. We need to make sure that those people in the private sector who want to invest in this infrastructure are carefully chosen and obey the union laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other candidate? Ian?
So to the union workers in the House, collective round of applause. You are all on the front lines. New York, one of the highest per capita union states in the nation, gained 76,000, I believe, union jobs last year, a significant increase in wages versus the non-union sector, and I am grateful to all of you for being on the front lines, for protecting wages as well as conditions. Really critical. I think that we've got to engage. I mean, I've been thankful for the opportunity to meet with the IBW representatives, I think 4 times in the context of the campaign so far. I'm by no means an expert, right? I'm here to serve all of you because you're serving our collective society. Something Tracy referenced in basically owning it, that we're all Democrats up here and nobody would disagree. I take exception to that. I think unions are collectively under fire across the country, and I think for too long the Democratic Party has taken them for granted. And it's time that we stop taking them for granted and we really speak up. If we talk about legislation, we don't have to drift back to a manufacturing question from the other answer to the other question. There are real Workplace Democracy Act. We're going to do it.
Thank you, Ian. Would any other candidate like to weigh in? Okay, we have finished. All have answered one. We're going to go down to the next round. So we're going to start with another question. And these are from the audience. So the next question is from Susan Wilkes. For Tracy, well, it has to go to whoever it goes to. How do you think your background... I have to pick another question because this is directed toward a particular candidate and someone else might get picked. Is that okay? Executive decision here. All right, and let's try this one. Yeah, when you choose a question, you have to direct it to all of the candidates. Okay, so this one is, if you do not win the primary, will you become independent, start your own party, or support our candidate instead of being a spoiler? Verbatim. Would you like me? Oh, I'm sorry. So the debating this question is, I was just so taken by that question.
We don't need 2 minutes for that, do we?
Max?
We don't need 2 minutes for that. Why don't we just...
Well, you can take the time that you want. We'll follow the procedure, Max. Well, take the time that you want. You don't have to always use your 2 minutes. So, Max, you will debate that with Linda. You might want to elaborate on that.
I think we have an answer to this question.
You think so?
Whoever wins the primary is going to be the person that we're going to support. And I think I can say that for everybody. And if I can't, please take off your mask, okay? Because we've been saying this at every stop, and I think our number one priority as a party is let's get rid of Tom Reed.
Linda?
Let's not just get rid of Tom Reed. Let's turn the House blue and set this.
Okay. Am I guessing, would you like a rebuttal? I mean, you can use this time to say anything you want. This is your time.
Talking about the IBEW,
Okay.
I'm very concerned because we've gone from about 30% union members down to like 7. And unless the unions do a good job of explaining their value to their membership, they're going to be gone. And when they're gone, I'm concerned about the fragility of our society because there's so much difference between the wage disparity, and I'm concerned about how we're going to stand up as a country. We need the middle class. We need to support them in every way we can. And if Janice is decided the way it's probably going to, because it was tied the last time they had the issue, and we've had Gorsuch, we're going to be in trouble unless we can convince everyone the value of unions, and they are very important to our country.
Thank you, Max. Linda?
Well, I'm not going to piggyback on that. I'm going to tell you that I am the candidate who is going to win that primary. So I hope you're all ready to support me. Not only my colleagues here, but all of you, because that's what it's going to take to beat Tom Reed. It's not a single person. It is going to take an entire community across this district. Democrats, independents, and some Republicans, as well as getting out the vote from those people who are marginalized in our society, that is, the African American vote and the Hispanic vote. We need to pull together as a community, pull everyone in to this democratic process, and move our country forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So would any candidate like to weigh in on that? I think your facial, oh, Tracy.
I've been thinking about this because towards the very ends that we all uniformly applaud, I would like to offer a pledge tonight. I and no one in my campaign, unless they don't want to be employed by it anymore, will go negative on any of these candidates, including in the last 10 days before the primary. That's how we're going to defeat Tom Reed together. Don't offer him ammunition, and pledge that we'll be positive with each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. Ooh, it's a long one. Okay, this question is about infrastructure. It says, I am a small business owner. I am observing that basic infrastructure such as electricity is very difficult to be adequately serviced. Small towns seem to be not equipped, therefore inhibiting small to medium business startups and or growth. What should be done for New Yorkers in this district? How can NYSEG be more pro-business and anticipate growth? Okay, so debating this question, the first candidate that will debate it will be Rick, and the second candidate would be Tracy. So, Tracy to the center. She'll get it. She'll get it.
So the whole infrastructure issue.
Turn your mic on, Rick.
I think you could have heard me, though. The whole infrastructure issue is huge, and it goes back to a couple of things. And Tracy speaks to this all the time, and I'm sure she will with the internet. But from a basic standpoint, we have to have trained workers. We have to have people go through apprentice programs. We have to have people go through programs through trade and tech schools where they aren't encumbered with huge debt, so that we have the people on site so that we don't have to see 500 trucks driving up from South Carolina when we're about to have a snowstorm, so that we have everybody's opportunity. You're looking at Ian, who is a small business owner, who understands the problems that small businesses face. And we have to make sure that we talk to those people who are the experts in the area. What do we need to do? But the first thing we need to do is we need to get people who know how to install and repair these different systems. And in order to do that, we have to educate them. And in order to do that so they're in our area, we have to educate them in our area. And I think the trade tech schools, I talked about BOCES before, is the first step in that.
Thank you. Tracy?
Infrastructure is a very large question. It includes transportation as well as the roads, as well as the internet. A few months ago, I went to Tioga County and heard an excellent report, although it saddened me to recognize the conclusion of which was that people weren't even able to get to their medical appointments. And here was the telling remark. Someone in the audience said, why don't they use Uber? There's no internet to even use an application like Uber. So in other words, even our lack of understanding of what people in our communities all over this district needs the kind of education so that we can begin to build the right transportation programs. You can't even take a bus. I have workers who are out in Chautauqua District, and I'm trying to get them to Elmira. There's not a Greyhound bus that can take them. And by the way, if they're going to want to build that stupid wall, then maybe they could build a smart railroad along that 86 corridor and get us commodities and people over to the East Coast. But we also do need to connect that internet, that the fiber runs along Route 86. It is not connected north and south, and every aspect of our community needs it. Our children for education, our farmers for the work that they do, our schools, our libraries, and there is no way we will attract new business to this district without it. In addition to just the physical layer, in addition to the wires and the last mile through wireless, we need the education of digital and information literacy, and we need net neutrality to be sure we can use that internet for innovation in this society, that we can still use that internet to get information freely and not have it managed and marketed by these large corporations that vertically go from the content right down to the wires.
I agree with that. I agree with what Tracy just said. And we have to also go back when we're talking about the infrastructure and the infrastructure bill and some of the proposals that are coming out of Washington right now to improve all these things. We have to go back and understand that we have not only private employee unions, we also have public employee unions. And we need to make sure that all this work is being done by union employees. Union employees are going to get a fair wage, they're going to get fair benefits, and not by some company that's going to come in here from who knows where and hire a bunch of non-union workers at an extremely low rate, similar to the original cross-country railroad kind of a situation. We need fair wages. We need to make sure that we're always hiring either private or public sector union members.
Thank you. Tracy?
With respect to then how we would manage a society that is moving towards a direction with this kind of infrastructure, I have to ask the following question of our representative in Washington. Apart from a single-payer healthcare system, I can imagine no more important legislation than could be passed right now to couple bringing the internet into a district like this together with getting a work project program like we had perhaps in the New Deal that gave government the opportunity to get people out there and get people working for something that's going to last and improve the economy of this entire district. Instead, he spent his time on that tax bill, which is a 1% Trojan horse that's going to turn against working and middle class people, that is going to increase the amount of money that that 1% gets, and does nothing to help the economy of this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any candidate like to weigh in on that? Eddie, and then Max.
I agree with what folks have said so far, that in terms of the infrastructure is what we need to move this district forward. Not only the physical one, as folks have pointed out, Rick pointed out, but Tracy pointed out, the digital one. You know, for me, I've actually proposed a jobs plan that includes rebuilding and moving our infrastructure forward by creating a reinvestment bank. The reinvestment bank would allow municipalities to pull funds from low to no interest loans to help rebuild and to rebuild our bridges, fix our roads, and if you've been on 86, some of those look like third world countries, and to build broadband and power across our district. You know, I was out here talking to folks in the audience in Corning, and some folks said they were out of power for 3 days. It just shows you we do not have the folks, the manpower and the resources to adjust for those things, to deal with the superstorms that we get. We need electricity in order to move forward, and until we start rebuilding, until we start focusing on infrastructure, we're getting nowhere on this corridor.
Thank you. Max?
We definitely need infrastructure. I agree with those approaches that were discussed. But we need to replace and rebuild 2 to 3 trillion or 3 to 4 trillion, depending on what study you've read, to rebuild our infrastructure. And for every $1 billion spent, we can expect 25 to 30,000 jobs, direct jobs, good paying jobs here. And also some spin-off jobs from the economic activity. So we need to do that, and we need to provide that for a present value, the jobs, the economic activity, and the future value, and that is the use the infrastructure will be put to make us more competitive as a nation. Small business is what builds jobs or creates jobs, but infrastructure is what they need to be successful in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian?
So I think we're all pretty long tired of partisan politics. Infrastructure is one of those areas where I felt like if either party were really genuine in wanting to come together and work together to create to the point of full employment for our communities, it would be infrastructure. It's something that continually is just kicked down the line for other areas. My 2 daughters haven't been able to drink from the school's water supply, I think in over 2 years. Contaminated water, and this is across out to Chautauqua. And this is something that, you know, we're not effectively addressing. Eddie mentioned we could use a loans program for the communities. This isn't something that should be a loans project for the communities. This is something that is a responsibility of the federal government for us to commit to, and it's not a measly program of 1.5 trillion that doesn't address ports, waterways. This is 4.5 trillion. And if we did it to rebuild our infrastructure for the future, this would be a direct creation of about 3,000 jobs to our district alone. If either party were really genuine, let's come together and get that done, because it's only getting more expensive.
Thank you. Any other candidate? Linda?
So I agree with what my colleagues have said thus far, but I'd like to go a little deeper. When we talk about infrastructure, we need to look really deeply at our planet. Our planet is in danger. When we go into the 21st century, we have to go into the 21st century thinking of our energy sources. Where are we getting them? What is it doing to our health? And what is it doing to our planet and the future generation? So, when we make our infrastructure, we need to talk about solar, geothermal, wind, hydropower. Without doing that, we are barreling down a dangerous road. This is an uncomfortable subject, but it's right here, it's right now. We already have the technology to move into the 21st century and get rid of our dependence on fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other candidate? Okay, next question. Okay. The next question is from Frida. With the current administration's cuts and personnel actions in DEC and other scientific bureaus, what actions or leadership can you provide to address slowing and reversing climate change? The first person addressing this would be Ian, and the second would be Eddie. So Ian, you would have the first shot at it.
So I mentioned this in Chautauqua a couple weeks ago, one of our forums. It was really, I think, amazing to see, I think Scott Pruitt, imagine a few weeks ago, I think announced that, or make the announcement at a Las Vegas meeting of some sort, that climate change is real and it's probably human caused. Huge, right? I mean, you take one of the, I think, examples of a perfect conflict of interest, I think, within the current administration, acknowledging, I think, a reality that we all realize, but then followed up to say that, well, it may not necessarily be a bad thing for humanity, though. So the first thing that I might do is say, I think that's ridiculous. You know, I think that there's so many things that we could be doing, right? We could move toward the Solutions Project, which is saying that, you know, we can move to 100% renewables maybe by 2050. We could co-sponsor Tulsi's Off Act, which says we'll hit, I think it's 80% renewable by 2035, 100% renewable by 2050. And what's really critical to that piece of the equation is that piece of legislation provides for the funding for retraining the current workforce and retrofitting the factories that we need to be sure that we maintain these jobs. You know, I think we're led to believe that talking about climate change and the environment is counter to our economic interests and vitality. And quite the opposite, I think, is true, right? I mean, I think our government is so owned and controlled by special interests that we're not even allowed to deal in facts anymore. From a small business owner, you know, facts matter to me, and these do as well. And I think that we can be so much healthier as a community if we move toward addressing the issue in facts.
Thank you. Eddie?
We're having microphone issues. We don't know whether they're on or off. So just by a show of hands, how many of you really believe that coal is going to be coming back? Fantastic. So, you know, we actually have a representative that believes that wholeheartedly, that agrees with our president that coal is going to be the future. But the reality is our renewables are our future. You know, the reality that we face is that the more you shuffle your administration around, the more we don't have a clear policy or know who's in place to lead this administration, the more we see crazy statements like coal's coming back. And I agree with Ian. I'm actually a very strong supporter of the OFF Act, the off fossil fuels. I think the retraining component is the key. It's taking our coal miners and providing them opportunities to retrain and get back to a workforce, get back to a different job. I'm hoping it's for green-collar jobs, being able to build solar panels, to be able to build wind farm parts here in this district. There is no reason why the New York 23rd Congressional District isn't a hub for green technology and green innovation. I'll say that right off the bat. But I'll tell you what, it can't be done when we have a representative who's a Washington insider, who cares more about making deals in D.C. and with the president than he does about his own people here.
Thank you. Ian, you have a minute?
And I think one thing that sets me apart up here, I think on a lot of these issues, is I've walked the walk. I don't just talk about it, it's not just ideology. So historically speaking, I've canvassed for shale shock to keep hydraulic fracturing out of our communities. I've worked for renewables in the community. My wife and I were sponsors of a wind farm, Black Oak Wind Farm. Unfortunately, it didn't get off the ground, but I put my money where I think my values are. And with the last few seconds here, things to really address, infrastructure, moving forward to address the climate changes coming. Renewables, we need to get there across the board. Agriculture, we need to insert carbon sequestration into some of the farming bill plans, and we can do that. And then the funding incentives, from renewables to the infrastructure pieces to strengthening the EPA. You know, our current representative has cut back funding for clean water, air, methane, any number of ways you look at it. Any one of us up here is going to do a landmark job in turning that corner again. I'd love that opportunity.
Thank you. Eddie?
Well, it's funny, when you start to look at Congressman Reed's actual financial background, when you start to look at the money he takes, you see how he votes. You see how we have bills that don't have prevailing wages for our union members. You see how we have bills that support the oil and gas industry across this nation. You see how that money is tied into votes in D.C. And that's not what we need. We need to make this place a hub for technology and for green climate change. We have an incredible place to live, to grow up, to raise a family, and if we keep wasting it away, we keep thinking about fracking, about pipelines, about changing the natural atmosphere that we have here in the 23rd Congressional District, that's where we get into problems. And that's why we have a representative that sold us out for a dollar on the dime.
Thank you. Would any candidate like to weigh in on this question? Okay, moving right along. Our next question is, thank you. Okay, this question is from Ruth. What suggestions do you have for increasing our economic standing in ways that decrease climate change? Be specific, please. So it's a similar question, but in what ways would you have for increasing our economic standing, yet at the same time decreasing the impact of, decreasing climate change? Did I do that okay, Ruth? Thank you. Okay, so arguing this question would be, first debater would be Rick Gallant, and second one would be Eddie. Got John again. Yes, this is the third round, Rick. This is the last question you will answer. I got this, don't worry.
I know you. I would
No, I know what I'm doing.
never question whether you ask this or not.
Thank you.
This is getting heated, guys.
Well, we kind of just went through a lot of that right there with, making this a hub for green jobs, for the production of green energy systems, for the production of things that will produce green energy outside of being a leader and actually using it and producing it. But I hate to sound like a broken record, but we have to go back to teaching people how to do that. And we have to teach people how to do those things by having educational programs where they learn how to make blades for windmills, where they learn how to make and install solar panels. We have to, I go back to what Ian said in the OFF Act and the retraining end of things, that we take the people that are entrenched and currently entrenched and making good money as workers, oftentimes union workers in the oil and gas industry, in the coal industry, and giving them the same kind of an opportunity that they're getting in the oil, gas, coal industries, in the clean energy industries. But to do that, we have to retrain them. So we have two kind of strands of that. We have to train new people to the industry, and then we have to take the people that are currently in the fossil fuel industry and retrain them with the same kind of, because those are great jobs, retrain them from a wage standpoint and a benefit standpoint. We have to retrain them so that they're going to continue to make that kind of money, be able to support their families, and in theory, do that right here, between here and Ithaca and Canandaigua and Dunkirk and Westfield and all the places in the district.
Thank you. Eddie?
Could you read that question one more time? I
Yes.
just want to make sure it's
It
correct.
says, what suggestions do you have for increasing our economic standing in ways that decreases climate change? Be specific.
So there's a couple things that I would propose, and I think first and foremost, we need to start looking at some of the tax credits that are out there. There's been proposals on the table to remove some of those tax credits for solar companies to come in and start to rebuild. I think we need those. We need to make sure that we have a moratorium on stopping those tax credits so that our solar companies can come in and start to encourage people to build, so that we have those wind farms that are able to come in, work with the communities to create wind farm and renewable energy sources there. But I think there's a bigger answer to this too, and a bigger question, and we've all heard it in the news about what we're going to do about tariffs, right? How we're going to deal with trade. Our trade impacts how we react to things. It deals how we deal with the environment. When we put walls up, and I mean tariff walls, not actual walls. We don't really know what's going on with the big wall, but we'll see. When we start to put tariffs up and we don't look at the different reasons why, we just do blanket tariffs, we have a problem. And we've got a representative that supports that from our president. You know, we're putting tariffs up against Canada, which is an ally and a trader. And by trader, I mean an actual trade, not a trader. They're someone that we count as an ally that's able to help us build our renewable energy here in this district. And we are trying to block them from doing it. So I think it's important that we look at the entire tax rollout that we have, and we start to incentivize renewable energies, which produce not only jobs, but also a way for us to get off of these fossil fuels.
Thank you. Rick?
So my wife, Amy, in the Rick shirt over there, and I moved to this area 19 years ago. We bought a whitewater rafting company and canoe company. And we have to be cognizant of the fact of what the role tourism plays in our area. And the reason people come here is because we have clean air, we have clean water, we have hiking trails, we have all the things. Well, it's getting worse, but we need to ensure that we maintain that so that people do have a place to come and enjoy the great outdoors, because those places are shrinking, and we're having fewer and fewer of those. And I think that's one of the, from an economic standpoint, that's one of our biggest draws, is getting people to come and enjoy all the things we have to offer out of doors.
Thank you. Eddie?
I agree with that. I think I said in the last question, we have incredible natural resources, but we also have a representative that has one of the worst scores by the League of Conservation Voters. Keep that in mind, that as bills come up to protect our natural environment here in this district, he votes against his own district.
Thank you. Would any candidate like to weigh in on that? Max?
I think we should change our philosophy as a nation. And anything that we can't recycle, reuse, or compost, we probably shouldn't produce it. Because if we do that, we reduce the waste. And part of that waste, let's just use an example. Food stuff that's wasted. We create as a nation over 400% of our nutritional requirements and waste 42% of it. If we could reduce that by 30%, we could feed everybody, all the 50 million people who are food insecure in this nation. And when you think about it, the French and the Parisians, they made a law that you couldn't send food to the landfill. You had to donate it to people who were hungry. And we can do this. There's opportunity. We can eliminate waste, we can reduce methane, and feed people. And I think that's a great way of going about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other candidate? Okay, next question. This question says, do you see yourself as a progressive or a moderate, and what do you see as the difference? So, the person arguing, debating this first would be Tracy, and then arguing with Tracy, debating with Tracy is Linda. Do you see yourself as a progressive, a moderate, and what do you see as the difference?
All of the above. I think that when you've got a congressman who loves to bully and label people, this is a big pothole that he's waiting for us to fall into. So it depends on what political spectrum you're looking at, and it depends on the temperament with which you offer a political thought that may or may fall into these categories. But let's take a shot at it. I believe in a single-payer health plan. If that's progressive, then I'm a progressive. I believe in improvements in education, free education all the way up through community college. If that's a progressive, then I'm a progressive. I believe that we need to build out the internet because it's the only genuine hope we have for a sustainable economy in this district. And if we require federal government light touch regulation to do it is progressive, then I'm a progressive. I believe in conservation of our environment. If maintaining the state ban on fracking at the federal level through a rejuvenated Environmental Protection Agency with Scott Pruitt out is progressive, then I'm a progressive. If it means getting rid of these external entities that want to turn our district into a dump, call me a progressive. I love it. And if it means fixing the water quality problem we have all over this district, not just in the Finger Lakes, making sure we're not pointing fingers at our farmers who also need help with the environment and wanted to, never mind the industrial farms, that's another subject, then I'm a progressive, call me that. If it means getting the NRA out of our conversations about how to modulate the Second Amendment with safe guns, safe gun users, and good lawmakers, I'm a progressive, but I'll say it in a very moderating voice. Thank you.
Linda.
I have no problem calling myself a progressive because in that word, progressive is progress. And Tracy, I'd like to tell you that single-payer health care is a nice thing to say, but you have to stand up for it, and it has to happen now. Not a bridge to it, not 10 years from now, not slowly, because now is the opportunity to do it. We have had the Affordable Care Act for the last few years, and people now realize that health care is their right. They must have health care like clean air, clean water. It is something that is vital, and it intersects everything else we do. It is more than 25% our economy. It is an employer issue. It is an employee issue. It is the issue of public health when it comes to prevention of gun violence, and we need to study it. Like a progressive, Tracy, we need to make sure we just don't eliminate the guns, we just don't react to this as an emotional issue, that we actually study what's going on in our country in terms of young men having the propensity to produce violence. Not only that, we have to be strong on the environment. We don't need to have a bridge to getting rid of fossil fuels. We need to start today. There's a plan in place from 2013 in order to have us fossil fuel free by 2050 and 85% fossil fuel free by 2030. Now, that plan exists. That plan is economically feasible, and all the technology for that plan exists today. We have to have the will. We have to stand strong. We can't be moderates. We have to stand up, go to Congress, be unafraid to speak truth to power. We have to stop the privatization of our institutions.
I'm gonna stop. You'll have another minute in just a minute. Tracy.
Linda, I feel a little bit like a straw dog that you put up to knock me down. Now let's talk about my position on health care. If tomorrow we could have a single-payer system, I would vote for it. I would stand in the front of the line for it. But I will not take away the health care that people have received to stand on a principle that we can't achieve. And if it's going to take a single-payer system 5 years, which is what I've proposed in various conversations, in order to work it in so our taxes don't spike, and so that we can transfer the workers from private insurance companies over into the government, and so that we can stabilize our economy, but most important, so we can get the votes in Congress, because it's not one person who's going to make this decision, then I'll do it, because I want to get something done for the people in this district. I will not stand on the ceremony of a term simply to have it fail time and time again, which it has already done in Congress.
Thank you, Tracy. Linda?
Tracy, it hasn't failed, and we don't have to wait for tomorrow. It is here today. The bill was introduced in January of 2017. We don't need to talk about raising our taxes because the taxes that will be raised are on the top 5%. This is an emergency. We can't wait 5 years. We have the will and the ability to do this beginning today. That bill was introduced in January 2017, and it was reintroduced. I'm talking about H.R. 676 was reintroduced 2 weeks ago by Ellison. We can get together with our colleagues in Congress. There is the will, both of the patients and the doctors. We are moving in that direction, and if we take a step backward, or if we decide to wait and see, then we have lost the opportunity that we have right now to take care of all the people in this country who deserve that basic right of health care.
Thank you. Rick, you want to weigh in?
Let me go back to the original question. So we all know that our current congressperson, I'm a little surprised Dora doesn't have her t-shirt on right now that says extreme ethical liberal on it. Arrogant, sorry. But we all know that our current congressperson loves to put labels on all of us. And we have to be careful about that. We have to, so Washington is screwed up. And it's screwed up because everything's become partisan. Everything's become partisan, so nobody is willing to work for the common sense good of all of us. And so what we have to be willing to do, and we have to not only be willing to do, we have to lead the way as the newbies in saying that this is ridiculous. In order for us to get something done, we have to work together. I don't care whether you have an R in front of your name, a D in front of your name, an I in front of your name, but we have to work together. And we have to initiate that, not wait for it to happen. We have to initiate that. And that is the key. We can't fall into our congressman's traps, Tracy said this, and she's right,
Okay,
of labeling us.
Thank you, Rick. Would anyone else like to weigh in? No? Okay, we're going to go to actually the last question of the night, and then we'll give them an opportunity to close. So, last question is, given the march today of millions of our nation's children and youth, how could you help lead in the conversation around the need for strong gun control legislation and better resources for our mentally ill population? The first debater for this question would be Ian, and debating with Ian would be Max.
So here again, I want to be really intentional in not just talking about it, but trying to do something about it. So today, when I probably should have been preparing for the debate, reading some notes, I spent a chunk of my morning to walk out and stand with the hundreds of students that walked out from Ithaca High School and stood there in silence, right? And it was really critical that we heed their voice and respect. You know, this is something that hits very home for them, and it hits home for me in a couple ways as well. So how do we lead? We lead by listening. Today I led by standing with, in support, and listening to the students. What I've said from last year, and I'm glad some other candidates are on board at this point, is to really be sure that we're listening to those across the district, in this case, bringing the legal and responsible gun owners to the table. My background is not with guns. I wasn't in the military. I wasn't a hunter, even though I grew up surrounded by both. But it's really critical for me to acknowledge that what I see across the country and in our nation is division over the topic. We're not allowed to discuss it. Standing at one of Representative Reed's town hall a week or so ago, and there's a woman who stood up who was a hunter, and she was also a professional in a school. And she was very, I think, scared and emotional around the topic. And what ended up happening was an escalation from another gentleman in the room who basically started to the point of yelling at her, right? And we can't have a functional dialogue around this topic. So how do we get somewhere? If it's continually legislators drafting from the top down, from DC, from Albany, I don't think that we're going to get anywhere. We're going to get the kickback. It's not going to be embraced. Something that I say quite often is you travel across our district, and what you see is you see more repeal the SAFE Act signs than probably stop signs, you know, in a lot of these communities. And they're telling you something, right? I mean, they're telling you that, you know, this is something that didn't resonate with them, and I've got 10 seconds on a serious topic, so I'll leave it for the next minute.
Okay, Max?
I have been around guns my whole life. My father was a military veteran, as was my mother. Both were World War II vets. They taught, my mom and my dad both served, and I did as well, 30 plus years in the Air Force. I think it's incumbent upon us to make these changes and to follow the lead of the people, the children who are speaking truth to power. And there's actually a young lady in here tonight, where is she, that did the protest. Is she here? She's still here? I guess she had to go home and study. Anyway, I think there are a lot of things that we can do and we must do as a nation to make us more safe. First of all, we need to have background checks that are national without any exception. We should not have an exception for guns, private gun sales, gun shows, or internet sales. We should also have no bump stocks. And we should attack directly the AR-15 and the tremendous firepower that it provides. But that's not the only weapon that has that kind of capability. There's AK-47s and AK-74s, and it goes on and on. We need to have magazines of reasonable size for a hunter. But nobody I know, no one I would admit to knowing, would need 30 rounds or 100 rounds in a magazine to go hunting deer, because they have to be a really bad shot. So that's not the place we should have that kind of weaponry. It's not making us safer, no bump stocks, and we should have safe storage for weapons. I'm very concerned about children's access unsupervised with weapons. So smart locks and storage for guns at home are very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian?
And so I think what we're seeing is people really just want us to take action, you know, right, as a community, as legislators, and how do we come together and really make that happen? I think Max pointed towards some of the seeming common sense steps that we could take. You know, the universal background checks, the bump stocks, the no fly, no buy list, and making sure that the policies we do have in place really work. You know, at a federal level, we can look toward the Lautenberg Amendment, and we can talk about the Dickey's Amendment also to make sure that we can really dig in and study the topic. You know, because that's what we really need to do. But also we need to look even deeper. You know, why do we have the gun violence? You know, is it from loss of economic opportunity and loss of, communities? Is it loss of the family sense? Is it from bullying? You know, do we as parents, do we need to stand up and acknowledge the issues with our children? For those where it does potentially. And the second part of the question regarded the mental piece of it, right? And we move to single-payer health care that addresses it. So many things we could do.
Sorry, Ian.
We need to come together.
Thank you. Max, you have 1 minute.
The mention of the Dickey Amendment, the person who actually brought that amendment has actually regretted it. We need to have the data to make the right decisions about all the things about gun violence, and we need to do that now, and I think that's an important point. Also, I was responsible for 1,260 airmen and women, both their training, their equipment, and care, and the vast majority of them were required to maintain currency and qualification in weaponry, some type of weapon. I would no more issue a weapon to someone that was not current, qualified, and certified to handle it safely than I would to hand my car keys to my 4-year-old grandchild and say, take it for a ride. This is something that makes no sense. And I think most sportsmen would actually appreciate the person standing next to them or in the next field to do it safely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Max. Rick?
I saved my popsicle sticks. So I agree with those things, but we also have to look at something else. The mental health part of it came up, and it never really got addressed. So the original budget proposal from our current administration, of which our congressperson is fully behind, cut back programs at schools, which are the very first opportunity for kids to get mental health help. School social workers, school psychologists, guidance counselors. I've already mentioned the before and after school programs. You look at these kids that are killing each other at their own schools, you read the same thing when you read about them. They're not connected. They're disconnected. They had no friends. They had no sense of belonging. And these are all things that we as adults have to foster, and the first line of defense for that is the psychologists, social workers, guidance counselors in the schools.
Thank you. Eddie?
Rick, I actually agree with you, and I also don't think the answer is arming teachers, right, which has been a big thing lately. I mean, exactly. You know, as a teacher myself, I can't imagine going around and doing group work and having a firearm piece on my side, right? I mean, I don't know, we don't necessarily trust the kids as it is, but to have an arm on you is a problem. But for me personally, you know, what I'll tell you is this: I did grow up hunting, and I grew up with guns. I grew up to learn how to use them safe and responsibly, like 99% of people in this district. And in fact, it's a tradition to have some guns passed down. You have guns for different things of family, things for the farm, those types of things. But the reality is that we aren't closing the loopholes that we need to make sure guns aren't getting in the wrong hands. You know, and we have a representative who at a town hall will constantly tell you that, you know, he's open to the conversation, but never actually acts on gun control.
Thank you. Anyone else? Linda?
We have an illness in our society that has produced this. And like all illnesses, you need to look at the underlying causes. It's very easy to blame the guns. And guns are a problem. They need to be in the right hands with people who are trained to use them. They need to be used only by responsible people. Of course, we'll all agree we need universal background checks to make sure of that. We'll also all agree that we should probably eliminate all assault weapons. They're not of any use. My friend Kathy, a hunter, has no use for them. I think we definitely have to reverse the Dickey Amendment, because as you may or may not know, that was an amendment that was passed to stop funding the CDC to study this problem. And if we want to solve any problem, we have to study it. And the last thing I want to say is that we're having a culture war. So we have to stop that. We have to bring hunters to the table, responsible gun owners to the table to decide our legislation.
Thank you. Okay, that was the last round of questioning. What we're going to do now is I'm going to choose randomly, and they're going to give you a 2-minute closing about their platform, their ideas, their plans. So the first person to close out the evening would be Rick.
So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 38 years. I've been a union member for 38 years. I'm on the board of directors of the New York State United Teachers. I represent approximately 150 school districts from Waverly to Westfield. I spend the time that I don't spend with these fine folks, I spend with teacher union leaders, whether they be teachers, SRPs, at various locations, doing just what we're doing right now, trying to work hard to make things better for not only our profession, but more importantly for the kids that we serve. So since I've been a teacher for 38 years, and any of you that are in education in here know what our job is, my entire life, every day of my life, has been spent getting people to work together, to collaborate, to post a goal, figure out what our goal is, and figure out the best way to achieve that goal. And if we don't achieve that goal, we back up, we get together again, and we figure out, okay, let's try this. That's huge. In many ways, I've been training for Congress for 38 years. Because that's what we need. We need people who are going to look at what we need, set goals, figure out how we can work together to get those goals, and if it doesn't work, then we'll back up, kind of circle around a different direction, and we'll try something else. And that's what we have to have. That's the only way that we can get out of this incredible whirlpool that we're in Washington right now. And you know what happens with most of the whirlpools that you guys are familiar with? They go down the can. So we have to really work hard at that. That's the key. So we need to be able to work together. And I have the background, because that's what I've done my entire life, in order to do that. So thanks again for y'all coming out tonight, and I'm sure I will see you again.
Thank you. Okay. So the next candidate is Tracy Machado. That's fine.
out tonight. It's great to see democracy at work. And now I would like to tell you the tale of two Tom Reeds, because we have a lot of work ahead of us in order to prevail on November 6th. And the problem is we have two Tom Reeds to run against. There's the radical Republican, Tom Reed, the opportunist who sells out his district. Last year he voted for that Trojan horse tax plan that caps state and local taxes at $10K, despite New York being one of the highest property tax states in the country. We have a man disloyal to his constituents. He likes being a Washington insider and in those bright Fox News lights instead of honestly representing the needs of this district. He's a sycophant. Last week he supported a trade war that would disadvantage constituents in our district because he wanted to, and this is a quote, send a message to the president that I'm standing with him. And then there's the election Tom Reed, the hypocrite who shows up for photo ops and tries to paint himself as a moderate, even though we know damn well he's not. The pretender who voted against the budget that protected health care for children out of an alleged concern for the deficit, when only a month before he brought us a deficit that has $1.5 trillion attached to it. And then the radical Republican who labels anyone who disagrees with him as an extremist. Let's talk about how extremely he neglects this district. Ask a dairy farmer in Chemung who needs health care. Ask a dresser rand worker who needs a job in Allegheny County, or a hungry child, and this is true, in Cattaraugus who goes to bed hungry every night. Let's go to the polls. Farmers and gas station clerks, urban professionals, blue-collar workers, African Americans and Latinos in Ithaca and Elmira and Jamestown, union members, teachers, mothers, fathers, daughters, and sons, and on November 6th, vote Tom Reed out.
Thank you, Tracy. Ian?
I feel like I'm disconnected from you back here. I was going to move the front, but let's roll from here. So this is it right here. Who's excited for this upcoming year and the opportunities ahead? Who's excited to get a new wave through this congressional election? So I am as well, and that's why I'm here. I'm not here because of partisan politics. I'm not here to just focus on bringing down Tom Reed or Donald Trump. This isn't necessarily about them. This is about us. This is about stepping forward with a new vision, with new integrity, genuineness. You know, for months on the stump, I think I was talking about, you know, I'm here because I'm not a politician, right? And I think I'm coming to learn, the more people I talk to, we should embrace being a politician. We're here to represent you. We're here to do it with honesty, with transparency. You know, I'm here to be sure that my message is the same with you here, that it's going to be in Chautauqua, that it's going to be in Ontario. And that's really important to me. You know, and where do we go collectively together? It's to represent this district. You know, what are we missing? We've got a lot of farmers that have been neglected, not getting the support they need. We've got industries that have been left behind. You know, we do have a congressman that talks about manufacturing, yet we continue to lose more and more of our jobs. You know, who will stand up to work for those and bring new ideas and new energy? You know, it's collectively us, and that's where we really need to go. That's how I lived my life. As a small business owner, I've been thankful. I've worked really hard to start 4 small businesses in upstate New York. I've been through the ups and downs of trying to keep the doors open, and I can tell you it's not getting any easier to be a small business owner. And I'm here to work for those. We're the bulk of the economy. I'm here because of the 3 women in my life, my wife, who bears the burden of, you know, this fully consuming task of, you know, what a political race is. I'm here because of my 2 daughters, most importantly. You know, I worry for their futures. They're going to have less economic opportunity. They're looking at a climate that's only getting worse, and they're looking at communities that are increasingly divided. I'm representing new energy. I'm here to represent you. I need your help. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ian. Linda?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you all for coming. You inspire me, you energize me. You keep me going on these long days traveling around this district because you care. I spent 30 years as a physician. In my youth, I wasn't hanging out, I wasn't getting high, I was working to understand people. 30 years later, I understand people. I understand that we're all the same. Whether we're Democrats, Republicans, independents, we're all the same. We all need to be safe, we all need to be loved, and we all need the opportunity to reach our dreams within the limits of our physical and mental abilities. I am here because I can no longer stand by and watch people suffer. I can't sit on the sidelines in my privileged retirement and not step up to serve my country. I believe that what you need in a congresswoman is leadership, the ability to collaborate, but most of all, the ability to listen. I have traveled this district listening to the people in it. And what I hear is a lot of poverty, inadequate housing, insecure food sources, and social isolation. These are the underlying problems in our culture, and we have to put our energy, our money, and our will behind it. We need to go to Congress, find the collaborators, stand up, and speak our truth as a community. And I need all of you to have my back to do it. I'm ready, I'm willing, I'm able, and I am determined to go there and represent you, Ian's children, my son, and all the future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next person is Eddie.
I first off want to just thank all of you guys for being here and thank the folks putting this on. I also just want to give a very strong shout out to the people that have stepped up locally to run. We've seen Christina Sansire in the back and Deb Lynch up front and all those other folks that are actually doing things, that are getting out there, starting early and saying, you know what, I want to make my community better. That's what we need. You know, there's a great sign coming in, as soon as you may have seen it. It says, when we vote, we win. And if anything, this PA 18 election that we saw last night is what we're going to do. We need every person to get out there, to get your neighbors, get your friends, get them out to vote. Because we took a district that was a plus 20% for Donald Trump and flipped it. Think about that. That is something that this district voted less for Donald Trump than Pennsylvania 18. Think about the impact that we can have going forward. Now, as I stand here today as a candidate for you guys, you know, I've done a lot of different things. I've been a middle school teacher, which at this point, as Rick may point out, you know, Congress looks like a middle school classroom right now. And I've also been an attorney. I've represented injured workers and grieving families across Western New York. And that's what we need. We need someone who's going to get people to work together. Gone are the days where you used to be able to fight it out on the Congress floor and then have a beer at the end of the day. We don't have that anymore, but that's what we need. We need people who are going to represent us. And the problem that we see is that we have a representative now who can't do that, who's become this Washington insider, as Tracy mentioned, and is more tied to the people in D.C. and to making those backroom deals than the people that are here sitting in this room. I'll tell you what, I don't like labels, but I will own labels when I need to. And if you want to call me an extreme liberal, well, you know what? I'll take it. As long as that means I care about the people that are sitting in this room, in this district, we are not going to stop until we get someone who represents us.
Thank you, Eddie. Okay. And our last closing is Max.
Thank you all for being here. Thanks for your engagement and thanks for your support. Just having you here energizes me and it leads me to this conclusion. If we all work together, we can turn this district blue. And I can do that with you. So give yourself a hand for being here and let's work together to do that. As you may know, I've got 30 years plus in the Air Force, officer, pilot, commander, Air Force Academy graduate, former attorney, litigator, defense attorney, own my own practice, worked for Lockheed for over 5 years in business development. I also was a Brookings Fellow for Senator Carl Levin on his personal staff for a year, and I worked for the Secretary and Chief of Staff of the Air Force and Air Force Senate Liaison. Why is that important? Because I can lead. I've done it before. I am a public servant. I'm not a politician. We need someone that will fight for us, advocate for us, vote for us, and for our best interests, not the best interests of special interests. I took the oath when I was 17 at the Air Force Academy to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and special interests are a domestic threat, as are the self-interest of our current representative. He gets that puppy dog look on his face when someone asks him at a town hall meeting, don't you have a conflict of interest when you vote down the Affordable Care Act? He goes, I will not dignify that personal attack by an answer. But I'm asking you here today, will you make him answer? Will you make him answer in November? We're going to get rid of Tom Reed. We are. So we need to think about the kind of person we want to
Max?
send to Tom Reed.
You have 10
Tom,
seconds.
I'm sorry.
No, you finish your sentence, of course, but we're done.
We need to send the right kind of person, someone that's guided by core values of integrity first and service before self, or we'll just have more of the same, and we can't afford more of the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I just want to end by saying I've really gotten to know these candidates over the past year, and I have to say they are some of the hardest working people I have ever met. They are kind, they are intelligent, and they care. Can you please, I can't imagine their lives right now, what they're doing. Can we give them a huge round of applause? So I thank you all for coming. I am going to let our great Chemung County Chair give us some closing words. But thank you all. I know it got a little toasty in here, but I just want to say they did a wonderful job.
Thank you, Dora, and thank